Hello, Gamecock fans. I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. Welcome back to Ball Don't Lie, SGTV's premier live sports show.
JP and I will be giving you our weekly insight every Friday.
This week on the show, we're talking collegiate football and basketball in and outside the Palmetto State.
We've got insight on the upcoming conference championships and the college football playoff.
Also, be sure to stick around for our coverage of the ACC-SEC Men's Basketball Challenge, as well as Week 7 of head-to-head college football pick'ems.
And without further ado, welcome to Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome to the Kennedy Greenhouse Studio.
I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. When you get it all right, you can hear that, and it just flies out of Founders.
An 18-year-old phenom, G.G. Jackson, has really turned his play up a notch. I'm almost 2 years older than G.G. Jackson. He's doing things I couldn't even dream of doing.
They're the Golden Gamecocks. They're just so much fun to watch. What a historic year for them.
This is Ball Don't Lie.
The Clemson Tigers defeated the South Carolina Gamecocks on Saturday in Columbia by a just really terrible score of 16-7, bringing an end to South Carolina's football season as the Gamecocks fall to 5-7. Clemson, meanwhile, they moved to 8-4. It was just I don't know. Of all the college football games I've watched, Spencer, certainly was one of them.
It is certainly one I'd like to forget. Just as an objective college football fan, really not an exciting game. Most of the action happened in the first 30 seconds. It felt like with, again, the freshman safety Khalil Barnes with just a masterclass performance. Recovering the backwards pass and scoring on like the first play of the game, and then getting an interception on the very next drive.
Absolutely. That really just put South Carolina in a hole they couldn't climb out of. And you see there, South Carolina, just one offensive drive that lasted more than 5 minutes. It was just, I struggle to find the words to describe how terrible that was of a performance.
They looked super flat, and you got to credit South Carolina's defense with really keeping them in the game. It felt like a game that, going back to our freshman year, the 30-0 defeat, or I don't even know if they scored at the end. Maybe it was 30-7. I don't remember, but it was a beatdown the last time the Tigers came to Columbia. And it kind of felt like it was about to turn into that, but the defense really kept the Gamecocks in this game, gave them a lot of chances to try and put points on the board. They just weren't able to capitalize on the offensive side, which is something we haven't seen a lot of, as the team's been pretty good offensively.
Yeah, absolutely. That, as we know now, the final game for Spencer Rattler as a Gamecock, the final game for a lot of people, with Mitch Jeter and Omega Blake entering the transfer portal, and I'm sure we'll see many more departures.
Mm-hmm.
And the next
it might get worse
days.
Before it gets better for South Carolina football right now.
Yeah,
at least it'll look worse. I'm sure Beamer will be out in the portal hunting himself, but you're going to see a lot of names leave and be like, oh.
There's Kai Kroger coming back, so at the end of the day, South Carolina will still have their
Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah, their eighth man, their eighth-year punter.
Yeah.
So.
That's, sometimes that's all you need. As we've mentioned, the Gamecocks will not be moving on to postseason play, but the Tigers sure will, as they now sit at 8-4 during the regular season, making them bowl eligible for the 19th straight year. And what a streak that is, JP.
Yeah, Clemson, one of the more consistent programs in all college football, dating back to those late 90s, early 2000s teams where there was kind of a little bit of turmoil. They had that electric run from 2015 to 2019, or really 2020. And the last couple of years have been a little bit more turbulent, but they're still winning 9 and 10 games year in, year out. They're not going to win 10 games for the first time since 2010, but they have a great chance to win 9 games, as you see there, projected in some pretty interesting bowl matchups. You have the Pop-Tart Bowl against Oklahoma State, who's playing in the Big 12 championship game this weekend. One of the best tailbacks from college football, Ollie Gordon. An Orange Bowl potential rematch with Tennessee in the Gator Bowl. We saw our Gamecocks facing off against Notre Dame last year in Jacksonville. The Holiday Bowl against Oregon State. That loses a little bit of luster with DJ Uiagalelei entering the transfer portal. I'm not sure if he's going to play.
And their coach, of course, leaving. And I'd expect probably a couple more of their more prominent players to maybe hit the portal, maybe planning to move to East Lansing, JP.
Yeah, that's college football in 2023 now. Of course, there is the one sore thumb matchup, which I think would be the funniest one possible.
Rutgers.
The Pinstripe Bowl against the mighty Rutgers Scarlet Knights out there at Yankee Stadium. I have personally...
That'd be a goofy game, man.
I have personally witnessed a disappointing 8-4 season culminate in a Pinstripe Bowl against Rutgers with 2013 Notre Dame, and It's definitely a visceral experience facing off against the Scarlet Knights at noon on December 27th.
Might not be ideal for the Tigers. Again, a team that, couple plays go their way. They're 10-2 and vying for a New Year's Six bowl. But as we saw in that graphic, there's a couple key defensive players already entered their name in the NFL draft selection with Nate Wiggins and Jeremiah Trotter. Two guys we seem to see week in and week out for the Tigers.
Yeah, Trotter, one of the best linebackers in the ACC, and Wiggins, part of that elite pass defense that Clemson carried around all season. Their defense was a ton of fun to watch. Interested to see if they end up playing in the bowl games. You have to think if they get one of those higher profile matchups against Tennessee or Oklahoma State, you might see them play, especially if it's Tennessee, after the Orange Bowl last season. That should be interesting. But talking about Clemson and how South Carolina feeling a little down right now, there's a bright side, Gamecock fans. The men's basketball team remains undefeated, shockingly so, through their first 6 games of the season. And we say shockingly, despite it not being a super tough schedule. You see they're 13th in strength of record in the entire country. And they're 6-0 for the first time since 2016. Winning is hard in college basketball. And South Carolina, so far, early returns are good on the bounce back from last year's disaster.
Absolutely, and shockingly is, of course, meant with all due respect. It's just when you look at this team last year, this is a team that probably loses a lot of the games they would have played this season. This team did not win the games they needed to last year, and that just shows you how much they're improving. And you could say the talent of BDL, myself, and JP were at the Notre Dame game, and the Gamecocks they look pretty good.
Yeah, it was an interesting start. Gamecocks fell down behind 8-0.
Yeah, I would have rather watched the halftime performance, which was a middle school basketball game, than the first 8 minutes of that basketball game again. But after then, it really started to pick up.
Kids were out there diving for loose balls and they're throwing elbows. There was no offense, nary a screen to be found, or a pick and roll. But it was just it was a great crowd, it was a great atmosphere, and my personal preferred outcome was that this very young and inexperienced Notre Dame team keeps it respectable, but South Carolina remains undefeated. I got what I wanted. Michie Johnson had a tremendous 29 points of 9 of 15 shooting.
His
with
career
5
high,
rebounds.
and he was just electric. It seemed like every time he got the ball, he wanted to shoot it from wherever he was, and it worked out 60% of the time.
Yeah, 60% of the time it works. Every time. Yeah. That's also the motto for BJ Mack as he put up 17 points. Those are the 2 leading scorers for South Carolina this year. The former SoCon first-team player out of Wofford having a tremendous year for the Gamecocks down in Columbia, down I-26. And he's been a ton of fun to watch, but it's been the defense. It's been the energy on defense. I'm really impressed by how South Carolina is able to switch on the perimeter and just they defend with such ferocity.
The really active hands. That's something I noticed. It seemed every time Notre Dame would swing the ball, there was always one or most of the time 2 guys there ready to just get their hands on it, put pressure on. And we saw the Fighting Irish take a lot of ill-advised shots in that one.
Yeah, they couldn't get anything easy. A lot of Notre Dame's game was getting in the paint and, working out from inside. They tried to go down low to Kebeniji a lot, working one-on-one with BJ Mack in the low post, and he just wasn't able to establish himself. Marcus Burton couldn't get the mid-range shots going. And then showed South Carolina was really able to clamp down on the perimeter and move around a lot. South Carolina, they're 6-0. They host a pretty good George Washington team that ran South Carolina out of the gym last year up in D.C. So, no, this opponent should not be taken lightly. There used to be the Colonials. I think they're the Revolutionaries now. The George Washington Revolutionaries, they're coming to Colonial Life Arena. That's going to be tonight. That's going to be the last game before South Carolina has a massive game next weekend against another undefeated team.
And we might talk about them right now. Clemson has also started the year off 6-0, leaving South Carolina basketball teams atop the SEC and the ACC, which is something. I don't know when the last time you could have said that is, but the Tigers, they sure look good after an 85-77 win at Alabama.
Absolutely. Just the second non-conference road win over a top 25 opponent in Clemson men's basketball history. Just really, really impressive performance. They just completely blew up what Alabama likes to do offensively. Alabama came into the game averaging 99 points per game. Just one of the best offenses in college basketball. And especially in the second half, Clemson was able to just really make life tough on Alabama. And they're a lot like South Carolina in that they switch around on the perimeter so well. They don't give up easy looks. And it translates down low. You see there, P.J. Hall with 4 blocks, Ian Shefflin with 2 blocks. So when it's tough on the perimeter, teams try and press inside, and they just leave themselves open to getting rejected at the rim. And the rim defense for Clemson is tremendous. But it's also Clemson's ability on the glass. You see there, Shefflin, 14 rebounds, and it seemed like every single one of those was a huge momentum swing, whether it was extending an offensive possession or just shutting down a potential good chance for Alabama. P.J. Hall remains one of the best players in all college basketball, dropping 21, 8, and 4 on the road.
It seems like every week we come here and we put up a stat line of P.J. Hall's, and it's just something absurd. And something about the Clemson offense as well. Their three-point shooting ability with Joe Girard, he had 4 threes in the game against Bama, moves into 9th all-time in the ACC, and, I mean, this team can make it rain.
Absolutely. So when you pair an active defense like that with abilities to score at all 3 levels, you have a great basketball team. You saw there they're receiving votes in the AP poll. They're 35th in KenPom, and we know how KenPom feels about ACC teams, so they have to be pretty good to be high up in that.
You're a KenPom enjoyer, aren't you?
I am a KenPom enjoyer. However, I think he needs to respect the ACC just a little bit more. Maybe tone it down with those 16 and 15 Big 12 teams. But once we get into March, you will hear the full JP rants and rambles about those metrics. The net ratings come out soon. Prepare for conspiracy theories.
It does have a March-like feel to some of the games already. There's been a ton of good competition and a lot of good upsets so far.
Absolutely. You know, the ACC-SEC Challenge, which we just touched on a little bit with the Clemson and South Carolina, concluded last night with the series a tie, 7-7, but a slew of upsets. The ACC 4-1 in games against ranked SEC opponents. And, man, we're just going to run through these here real quick. Some tremendous performances in some of these games. As Syracuse defeats LSU 80-57, just a blowout there. LSU, they lost to Nicholls State. They're not looking too hot so far early on in this year. Judah Mitz had 33 points for the Orangemen. Number 12, Kentucky defeats number 8, Miami, 95-73. Ochad Normier and Wooga Poplar were no match for Kentucky's defense. Georgia Tech defeats number 21 Mississippi State, one of the biggest upsets of the season so far, 67-59. Georgia Tech lost to Howard earlier in the season. Mizzou goes on the road to the Zoo and defeats Pitt, 71-64.
And Mizzou's a basketball team. We watched some of that game, and that team's pretty scary. We saw them in postseason play last year look pretty solid, and they look good again this year.
Absolutely. Ole Miss defeated NC State 72-52 in a really shocking game. I thought that would be one of the better ones in this challenge. Number 17, North Carolina, one of the more fun games we've had to watch so far this year. They defeated number 10, Tennessee, 100-92. Virginia clamped down and shut down everything number 14 Texas A&M
that's
tried to do.
That's the most Virginia score you've ever, 59-47, that's Virginia basketball.
Absolutely.
Right there.
They had a man who finished with 8 blocks on the night. Wake Forest perhaps saving their season with an 82-71 victory over Florida. Arkansas similarly with a season-defining win over number 7 Duke, 80-75. Boston College going on the road to Vanderbilt, one of the tougher places to play in all of college basketball, and they win 80-62. Georgia defeats Florida State, overcoming a 17-point deficit and with a game-winning bucket with a second and a half remaining. And then finally, Auburn defeating Virginia Tech 74-57. So a fair amount of blowouts, but the games that were good were amazing. You know, that North Carolina game, Armando Bacot really got it going down low. Cormac Ryan off the bench following his ankle injury was a huge boost to the three-point range of North Carolina. They dropped 100 points on a team that came in boasting the number 1 defense in all college basketball.
Yeah, and we've had the privilege of watching some of these games, and I was telling you that this looks like more so the North Carolina team of 2 years ago that made it to the championship game than the disappointing one of last season. Much to Tar Heels fans' happiness, I guess. Last year was just
chagrin.
Such an utter disappointment. But they look really good, and Tennessee, another really good team, but it's hard to win a game in Chapel Hill.
Absolutely. Tennessee, they fall to 4-3 on the year, but their 3 losses are to Kansas, Purdue, and UNC. 2 of those being in Hawaii, and the other being on the road in Chapel Hill. So just, iron sharpens iron is, I guess, the motto for Rick Barnes' team as they are facing one of the toughest schedules. And the buck doesn't stop there. They have a couple more games remaining against tough teams, but
hey, they play in the SEC, but It's not the only conference rivalry we're going to talk about. It's the Big 12 Big East battle will continue with Xavier versus number 6 Houston at 6:30 today. And we've got what another great slate of games going on coming up here soon.
Yeah,
Butler defeated Texas Tech 103-95 in OT. Number 15 Creighton. Creighton's one of those teams. They're always super it's so hard to perceive Creighton, I feel like.
Well, yeah, they start the year top 5 or something,
Yeah.
and they get nuked from orbit by Colorado State, and they bounce back here with a big blowout win on the road.
Mm-hmm. They sure do, but look at all these matchups. Xavier versus number 6 Houston. We've got West Virginia versus Rick Pitino, St. John's. DePaul versus Iowa State. And then what a matchup this is. Number 5 Kansas versus number 4 UConn. Every single college basketball fan has got this one circled, as these teams look like two of the deepest and strongest teams in the country.
Absolutely, 9 o'clock ESPN2 action there.
And of course the defending champions, UConn, important to mention. They're looking to repeat, and they look good.
Absolutely. It's the first time the last 2 national championship winners have faced off the subsequent season in a non-conference game since 2014, when Rick Pitino and Louisville played against Kentucky. So this is this is perchance the game of the season in college basketball.
Perchance, I'd say.
At Allen Fieldhouse with primetime billing on ESPN2. This should be a lot of fun, but this is only the first half of matchups.
It sure is. We've got Georgetown, TCU, K-State, Villanova, Kansas State, a team that we loved to talk about last year with Marquise Noel and the fellas. I mean, that was an all-time March Madness run. We've got number 25 Oklahoma versus Providence. Oklahoma getting a huge win earlier in the week. Number 9 Baylor versus your beloved Seton Hall Pirates. And then another top 25 matchup. Number 3 Marquette versus number 16 Texas. The battle of the Shaka Smarts,
Yeah, it's just facing off against his former team. That one is going to be so much fun at the Pfizer Forum in Milwaukee.
It sure is. And I know you're a Big East truther, I would say. I think that's fair to admit.
Well, when you have literally a third of the last 21 national championship winners, and you're just one of the best teams year in, year out in March, but you also pick up big wins in non-conference play, and I think that'll be on full display. We saw it last night with the Big East going to 2-0. Texas Tech, a very good team, a very good defense going up against Butler, a program that's been in a little bit of turmoil lately, and the Bulldogs just rallied behind one of the toughest places to play at Hinkle Fieldhouse.
Absolutely.
In Indiana. We've had some great Butler teams take down some even better opponents in that arena. But man, this is what college basketball should be. Big heavyweight title fights between guys like Kansas and UConn, but you also have, some interesting matchups. Rick Pitino and St. John's, an old Big East showdown against a team like West Virginia. You have Iowa State going on the road to Chicago to play DePaul. Georgetown and TCU, Ed Cooley and the Hoyas with their first big chance on a national stage to really kind of show what they're about in year one. And Villanova. Which Villanova team are we going to get? Are we going to get the Villanova team that blitzed through the battle for Atlantis and beat teams like North Carolina and Arkansas and Michigan and Memphis? Or are we going to get the Villanova that lost to Penn and St. Joe's? No disrespect to St. Joe's. After they took Kentucky to overtime in Lexington and then went on the road and defeated Villanova, they look like the real deal Holyfield amongst mid-majors so far this year. But
a real flip of the coin on what team you're going to get, it definitely appears.
Exactly, and so that's a Villanova team going on the road. This is going to be a tough battle for Kyle Neptune's squad.
But JP, as much as we've talked about basketball, isn't it time we move to the gridiron?
Oh, I think it's time we do return to the gridiron. After the break, we're going to catch you guys up on the latest college football playoff rankings.
The college football playoff picture has shaken up quite a bit since we last covered it on November 3rd.
Yeah, absolutely. You have the defending back-to-back national champions, Georgia, at number 1, but then everything else is different. Michigan slotting in at number 2 following their titanic victory over Ohio State. You have the Huskies of Washington, undefeated, very
JP,
tested.
Was it always the Huskies?
I do believe it was always the Washington Huskies, but
we even made the graphic purple and black just for them.
They have been tested all year, but they remain undefeated. They're at number 3. Number 4, the undefeated Florida State Seminoles, but a huge blow as they lost Jordan Travis.
That was just so sad. Man.
Yeah, in their second to last game of the season. Last time we had Ball Don't Lie, Jordan Travis was healthy and well. But it's been a tough run of things for the Seminoles. But guess what? They remain undefeated. They have a tough matchup this week. And then the outside looking in.
Oh, wow.
Oregon and Ohio State, two of the top one-loss teams in the nation, but joining them, Alabama and Texas. Texas at number 7, Alabama at number 8. So you have 4 one-loss teams and 4 undefeated teams heading into this final weekend. One of the more intriguing playoff pictures we've seen in college football over the last couple of years, because there hasn't been the huge blood weekend that we expect. We might just get it this weekend, however.
We just might, but it feels like the committee actually has more than just like, I feel like it's always been the battle for the 4 spot, or who's ranked number 1. And this year it's like, who's getting into the college football playoff.
In general.
All 4 of those teams could lose and throw such a wrench into things, and it would be beautiful, JP. It'd be kind of interesting.
Georgia loses, Michigan loses, Florida State and Washington lose, then 5 through 8 would just replace them, don't you think?
We could have 8 one-loss teams, I think. I think if the math that's the way that works.
If the math is mathing, but it's it would come down to the resumes for some of these teams. Georgia, they have the victories over Mizzou, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. Michigan, they've come on recently with wins against Penn State on the road and then Ohio State at home. Washington, of course, games against Oregon State and Oregon. Florida State, they had the season opening win by 3 touchdowns over LSU.
Defeated Clemson.
Yeah, defeated Clemson, who really finished the year strong as well. It's a shame they didn't get to match up against that NC State defense or against Louisville in the regular season, but we'll be getting the Cardinals against the Seminoles here soon enough. Ohio State wins against Notre Dame and Penn State. Oregon, they seemingly have like a trillion blowout wins. And Texas, with perhaps the best win in college football, going on the road and defeating Alabama by double digits.
And Alabama with a lot of good wins.
Absolutely.
There's so many teams with so many good wins, but then do you respect the resume or the head-to-head more? Because it's hard to say what I would do in the situation that the committee's in, because it's so tough.
And thankfully, we're not in that decision. And thankfully enough for them,
we will certainly judge them for it, though.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
what we do.
That's
here.
what we do.
But thankfully enough for them, things are going to shake out pretty nicely over the next couple of days, of course, as the NCAA Conference Championships start this weekend. And we've got some mid-major matchups to kick off our coverage. The Group of 5 conferences, they're going to get their time here. Number 24, Liberty against New Mexico State. That's tonight, CBS Sports Network on, tonight on Friday. Friday Night Lights there in Lynchburg, Virginia. And man, Jerry Kill and the Aggies of New Mexico State. What a great performance by them this season. 10 wins for just the second time ever. 10-3 on the year with a chance.
Beat some good teams, too.
Yeah, absolutely. They went on the road and beat Auburn by 3 touchdowns. Liberty.
Something Bama barely managed to do last week. I mean, I know the Iron Bowl's a lot different than playing New Mexico State, but...
4th and Jalen Milroe.
Yeah. We'll
Jamie
get there.
Chadwell and Liberty undefeated, ranked in the college football playoff top 25. And then tomorrow, big noon, Toledo and Miami of Ohio in the MAC
Tournament Championship, live on ESPN from Ford Field in Detroit. Toledo 11-1, Miami of Ohio 10-2. This is one of the best seasons in the history of the Miami of Ohio program. Meanwhile, for Toledo, this is really just kind of business as usual for them. They've really emerged as one of the premier programs in the MAC conference. Some Mountain West action. We've really enjoyed the Mountain West this year as UNLV, the Running Rebs, against kind of the stalwart of the conference, Boise State, 3 o'clock Fox. That one is going to be in Las Vegas at the Raiders Stadium. In a matchup for potentially the New Year's 6 bowl bid for the Group of 5, you have Southern Methodist going up against number 22 Tulane on the road. One of the more high-flying offenses in college football, going against a hard-nosed, tough defense, 4 o'clock on ABC. And then finally, the one we all care about here in the Carolinas, it's the App State Mountaineers against the Troy Trojans in the Sun Belt title game, 4 o'clock on ESPN.
Let me give a shout out to my sister. It was always Roll Nears. She's gotten to see a lot of good games up there in Boone. And App State, emerged as just a premier Group of 5 program. They're known more for their signature upset wins or just signature wins, like getting the Hail Mary against Troy there shown in the picture. But it's they've had just such an interesting year, because they should have a lot more wins than they do, but they have found ways to lose unfathomably. But then they go on the road and beat undefeated James Madison. It's like, what team is going to show up? But it's
Joey Aguilar was just a mediocre, I don't want to say mediocre, but a community college quarterback who barely amassed 2,900 yards in 2 seasons. Now he's transferred over to App State, and he has like 38 touchdowns, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in terms of the advanced analytics and in terms of the counting stats. And he's just a true gunslinger. He has 9 interceptions. Who cares? He's going to go out there and throw the pigskin all over the field. That one, Troy's defense is really tough. App State's offense, one of the best in all of college football. So 2 clashes of styles there. But, man, Michael Pratt and Tulane against SMU, that could be one of the best games of the entire season, Spencer.
It sure can, and we'd love to, give love to our group of 5 teams here. I'm huge on Tulane. I think they would have beaten Ole Miss if Michael Pratt was healthy. A really good team. We saw what they could do in a huge bowl game last year, knocking off USC. Infamous Caleb Williams picture there, just crying. And, to be fair to him, I think they scored 42 points in that game, and his defense gave up 43. So, not much you can do, but Lincoln Riley teams never have defenses. But we will move on to Power 5 teams. Number 14, Louisville faces the Noles of Florida State to see who reigns supreme in the ACC. JP, I know you've got a little Louisville bias in you. Not bias, but you've got some inside knowledge on them.
Yeah, it's still one of the best seasons in Louisville history. Even despite that heartbreaking loss to Kentucky last weekend, you hate to see it end like that for Jack Plummer and this team, but they still have a chance to make it special. Louisville in the ACC title game for the first time since joining the conference back in 2014, and they're looking for their first conference title in general since 2012 when they won the Big East, went on to the Sugar Bowl. Teddy Bridgewater and friends just absolutely lit Florida on fire. It's a Louisville team that they're getting their dues for how good this team was. You see Jack Plummer, 3rd team All-ACC, Jawar Jordan, 1st team All-ACC, 3 other offensive starters, All-ACC. They're going to have their work cut out for them going up against a Florida State defense, that has been the crux of this team. The offense has been super fun to watch, but you see there they have 38 sacks, which is tied for 8th in college football, and they allowed just under 17 points a game. Kalen DeLoach and Gerard Verse,
they're just everywhere on the field. It seems like every time you look up at the Seminole defense, it's one of those 2 guys that are making the plays. We saw DeLoach with that huge strip sack on Kate Klubnik earlier in the year. Verse, of course, one of the most highly touted NFL prospects at the defensive end position. But it comes down to the quarterback. Of course, we can talk about how great Trey Benson is. Over 1,000 yards, 15 scores, no Jordan Travis. It's up to Tate Rodemaker, and that's a
making his third start of his career and just his 2nd of the season. His first came last week against the Florida Gators on the road. So
it's going to be the story of the game, really.
Yeah, exactly.
How does this offense look without Jordan Travis at quarterback against a really good Louisville team?
Yeah, they were a very explosive offense. You see their top 20 in terms of plays of 20-plus yards, and a lot of it came from Trey Benson. Jordan Travis making plays with his feet, extending plays, and they're going to have their, it's going to be tough because it's a Louisville defense that gets after the quarterback really well. They have some great stunt action. They're really great at twisting and confusing offensive lines. They're 16th in pressure rate. They get after the quarterback a lot. And so it's going to come down to how Rodemaker can stand in the face of the Louisville pressure. But in terms of pressure, I don't think there's a game more pressure-filled than the SEC championship matchup in Atlanta between 8th-ranked Alabama and the defending NCAA champions, the Georgia Bulldogs.
2-time defending champions looking for their 30th straight win. Just insanity. This team has just put on a clinic the last couple years, and the last time they lost was, I believe, was it against Bama?
It was
a couple
in the
years
2021 SEC title game, I believe.
It's so high, you literally can't even remember it. It's so long ago. The Georgia team, led by Carson Beck at quarterback, he's almost got 3,500 yards. They haven't been ranked number 1 the whole year, but they've been 1 or 2 seemingly every week. 22 scores for him. Dewanna Edwards in the backfield, as well as Kendall Milton, the 1-2 punch. They have almost a combined 1,500 yards. Nice 2-back system there. It's hard not to talk about Brock Bowers, though. Their leading wide receiver.
We don't know if he's going to play.
Hybrid. Is he going to play? Because that is massive. He's one of the most talented players in all the country. And, he's just a freak. I can't even he's just ridiculously good at everything he does. And this defense, I just put a bunch of team stats on there because it's hard to highlight one person when you're top 10 in seemingly every single statistic against SEC opponents. The Dogs look good, but what about the Tide, JP?
Well, it's an Alabama team that started off the year rough. They lost to Texas. They looked shaky in some games against teams like South Florida. And people were really kind of wondering whether this Alabama team was beginning to slope downwards in terms of the dynasty of Nick Saban. And the old Saban said, "Not so fast, my friend," and they really have turned it on as of late. They started blowing out teams, survived a scare against hated rival Auburn. It's been a lot about the defense. They've been the constant all year long. They've been really good, one of the best in the country. They force a lot of turnovers. Arnold with 5 interceptions, tied for third most in all of college football. But it's been about how the offense has improved. Burton, 750 yards, give or take, 7 touchdowns. Jalen Milroe, making it happen with his legs, but also through the air with 21 passing touchdowns.
I'm a huge supporter of Jalen Milroe. I think he's super talented. He's such an athlete with his legs. And when he gets going, he is fast. Like, it is, you almost have to have a QB spy or something kind of schemed around him taking off. Because once he gets going, it's hard to catch him. But again, McClellan on the ground as well, over 800 yards. The Bama team is really, as you mentioned, coming to their own as the season's progressed. I think it's going to be a really good one in Atlanta this weekend.
And it's really just going to come down to whether or not Alabama's offensive line, which has been that's the one thing that hasn't gotten better as the year goes on. It has been a big struggle for them up front, keeping Jalen Milroe protected and upright. He's going to have to make some plays with his feet, escape the pocket, escape pressure. He's going to have to make some big-time throws with hands in his face, maybe anticipating hits, hanging in the pocket, making a throw when you know you're going to get clobbered. And I think Jalen Milroe is that dude enough to be able to do that, but it's going to be about how many times he can do it.
Absolutely, and we'll go from one undefeated to another as number 2 Michigan and number 16 Iowa will duke it out for the Big Ten title. And, you know, this could be the most boring football game ever. The khaki wonder, Jim Harbaugh's back on the sidelines. Khakis versus Kirk. As Kirk Ferentz came out this week and said it would be kind of funny. And, JP, I'd get a real kick out of this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe the over-under for this game is like 2 points, maybe. We might get more of like a hockey
Kick a
showdown.
field goal and you will win.
First 2 points wins. Iowa doesn't have a hockey team, but I feel like their hockey team could score more points than their football team does half the time. Iowa escaped Lincoln, Nebraska with a 10th victory last week on Black Friday, a week ago today. And they're going to need their defense to really be as good as their numbers say. And it's a great defense. It's a great special teams. Iowa released a hype video for this game about their punter. It was about how their punter can pin the team deep and get
Their
out.
punter made the Joe Burrow entrance in his last game at Kinnick Stadium a couple weeks ago. That's a punter.
This is what
Joe
we
Burrow
want
threw for
college
almost
football to be.
5,000 yards. This guy pins offenses back, and they're treating him like he's the king of Iowa. And
He
deservedly
is.
so. He's amazing, but that just shows how putrid their offense is.
He's the corn king, my friend. You see Deacon Hill, their quarterback, 976 passing yards. This is a real football team. This won 10 games. This is special. This is what this is probably the lowest ranked 10-win team from a power conference I've ever seen. And, Michigan's
Deservedly
offense,
so.
Michigan's offense doesn't light the world on fire, but they're not going to need to. They're going to need to light exactly
7 points on the scoreboard.
Yeah.
A 7-3 thriller might be what we expect here. But, of course, J.J. McCarthy's had a solid year, almost 2,500 yards, 19 scores. Blake Corum,
JJ
I believe believe Corum has the Big Ten touchdown record now, 22 scores on the ground. I could be completely mistaken, but if so, I believe it's the Michigan record. He got a real nose for the end zone. But they also have an incredible defense. First in opponents' points per game. Mikey Sanders still one of the best defensive backs in the nation. He's also tied for third with 5 picks on the season. It might not be the most interesting game, but does it have a lot of implications?
Absolutely. Iowa, it would be kind of funny. They have a chance to do one of the greatest, funniest things we've ever seen. After all this Michigan stuff, after everything they've been through, and they come out of it, and they act like Jim Harbaugh was wrongly convicted of murder, and this one was for you, coach, as he's sitting on the couch after cheating. After all that, to lose to Iowa, it would be so funny. But going a little bit more south, number 7 Texas is going to take on Oklahoma State as the Cowboys are going to tussle in a Wild West showdown for the Big 12 belt out there in Arlington at Jerry World. And it's the first time these teams have met with such implications since 2008. You see there that picture that game between number 6 Oklahoma State
Colt McCoy could sling the rock
and number
back
1
then.
Texas with Colt McCoy and Jordan Shipley. Those were the days. But man, Spencer, Texas 11-1. They've been beating teams up and down the field, and they're still just at number 7. What do they got to do against Ollie Gordon, Alan Bowman, and the Cowboys to really show the College Football Playoff Committee that they deserve this?
Yeah, well, if UCF can decimate Oklahoma State, you got to think Texas can too. So they just got to show up, and I think they just got to lay a beat down here. Oklahoma State they've had an interesting year. Ollie Gordon, of course, one of the best running backs in the nation, over 1,500 yards, 20 scores. He's incredible. But as we were doing some research last night, you were like, what is the Oklahoma State defense good at? And you came up with blocked kicks. So I think they might just be all right. So I think Texas should be able to get this one done. But no Jonathan Brooks. As we mentioned in our last episode, unfortunately, he is out for the rest of the year. Just really sad stuff there. But Quinn Ewers putting up a stellar campaign himself. And the Texas offense, they've gotten it done.
Yeah, and just a few, missing some games due to injury. But it's going to be about how Alan Bowman, how do you have more interceptions than touchdowns in modern college football? Going up against a ball-hawking secondary, I feel like that portends good fortune for Texas.
I think it sure does. And it's going to be a super interesting game, again, because of the implications. Everything we talk about.
And because of Ollie Gordon.
Is, of course, he's pretty much the Cowboys' offense. But, JP, get your tissues at the ready. Last but certainly not least, a Pac-12 throwdown between number 3 Washington and the 5th-ranked Oregon Ducks. It's kind of emotional. It's the last Pac-12 football game day.
Yep.
It's
one out.
And it's tonight, isn't it?
It is indeed. ABC billing, primetime 8 p.m. kickoff, and it's going to suck here at ESPN. Be like, oh no, who could have done this to the Pac-12? As they hold the knife behind their back that they literally stabbed the Pac-12 with. But I'm not going to let them taint my enjoyment. This is one of the greatest conferences in the history of sports. So tradition-rich, so just pure in everything we want college football to be. And
every sport.
That's
it's
why we went
with
this picture. This isn't a picture from the big showdown this year between Oregon and Washington that already happened. It's not one of the million other great rivalry games. It's the 1994 Kenny Wheaton, the pick. The first time Oregon defeated Washington in 9 games off of this tremendous interception return for a touchdown, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. Yeah, it's
awesome.
The call for it is amazing. Look it up after you watch this episode of Ball. Get yourself hyped up for just some amazing football that's going to be taken away from us unjustly. Oregon, Washington, we already saw these teams face off once this year, and it was the best game of the college football season. 2 heavyweights going toe-to-toe, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr. And really, it's going to come down to Washington's defense. They've struggled as of late a little bit, but in that matchup, they held Oregon to 0 for 3.
Very clutch against Oregon.
Yeah.
And when it mattered, bend, don't break. That's the name of the game against really good offenses, and you can see both teams, really good offenses. So it's going to see how the defenses respond.
Absolutely. Jordan Muhammad, 3 interceptions, 12 pass breakups for Washington. He's going to have to come up with a big play in the secondary. And, we mentioned Michael Penix Jr. and that duo of wide receivers from Odunze and
Jalen Polk, yeah.
But Dylan Johnson at tailback, over 900 yards on the season. Going up against an Oregon defense that is outstanding. They're allowing just 4.5 yards after catch on the year, so they're going to really have to be on their best behavior to stop Oregon or Washington from breaking some of those big plays through the air. There's just not much else we can say about this game other than, hey, you're going to pay for the whole seat, but you're only going to need the edge.
That's one of my favorite JP quotes. We've been fervent believers of the Pac-12 this year, so it's going to be. I think this is the matchup that everyone deserves to see the Pac-12 in its full glory, I'd say. It's really going to be something. The playoff implications are there. I think the winner of this game gets in the college football playoff.
Absolutely.
So
there's no reality.
It's truly
we will riot.
It's truly a college football playoff game here tonight, 8 p.m. on ABC. JP, I know where I'll be.
Oh, I know.
Glued to the screen.
I will be glued to the screen until I have to go to work. But don't worry, what will be on screens when I'm at work.
Yeah, it's.
Don't quote me on that.
We're gonna take a quick commercial break and then we'll roll through pick'ems for the second to last week here on Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome back to BDL Pick'ems. I'm currently 29-12 on the season, while Spencer sits at a mediocre 19-22.
Almost 500, JP. We're going to work on it. We've got a lot of games for you today. Liberty, New Mexico State, JP.
Jared Kill and the Aggies going into Lynchburg, taking down Jamie Chadwell and Liberty. Give me the Aggies in the biggest game in the history of their program.
Liberty's undefeated in football and men's basketball. I think they'll stay that way. Give me the Flames. And JP, emotional moment. Grab your chairs. Washington, Oregon. JP.
The last time we had pick'ems, I picked
You
Oregon
picked
State,
You
and I picked against the Huskies.
also picked the Ducks the first time.
I did do that.
Real Husky truthers never forget.
And Washington, time in and time out, has proved me wrong. Oregon's been writing a lot of checks with their mouths that I haven't seen them cash with their play on the field against Washington. Give me the Huskies. Michael Penix Jr. shutting everybody up, 10-point underdogs. Yeah, right. Huskies by 1 million.
JP's, I guess, not going to ask me who I want to pick, but I'll
I already
also
know.
take
I
the
already
Huskies by
know.
1 million because week in and week out, I could never betray the team in purple and gold. Texas, OK State, a Big 12 shootout. JP, talk to me.
Ollie Gordon's awesome, but this Oklahoma State team is just so...
They're just not good, are they? They're not great.
I don't think they're good. They're the worst 9-3 team I've ever seen. And I think Texas is just going to put on another show for the committee and be like, hey,
If
we're still here.
BYU was cool, then it would have been another Texas-Oklahoma game, but they somehow choked a massive lead. I'll also take Texas. They haven't really done me wrong, except for their one loss, but we'll kind of move past that. Toledo versus Miami of Ohio. JP?
You know, Chuck Martin, former Notre Dame offensive coordinator, always got to bring it back to the Irish somehow. But one of the best seasons of their history. But man, their quarterback out for the year. Their backup quarterback is filled in, Avion Smith, a Lexington, South Carolina native, former White Knoll quarterback. But I think Toledo, they're just too heavy. They're just too much to handle. Give me the Rockets.
Yeah, plus they have a literal rocket pointed at Bowling Green's 50. That is so awesome. I found that out like a couple weeks ago. I've been riding high on Toledo ever since. I think they got it again this week. The Mountain West, UNLV versus Boise State. The Running Rebs, I didn't listen to them last time. I'm going to take them in this one. I think they'll take down the Broncos.
Absolutely. You know, they get it in their home stadium. They're going to have the crowd behind them. One of the more explosive offenses in college football. Give me UNLV. Now, Georgia and Alabama. Potentially the best game of the college football season. Two of the biggest heavyweights.
Unbelievable game.
Spencer, tell me who you got.
And this could go down as my signature pick, or I will look like an absolute clown. It was always the Tide. I hate to break it to you. Give me Jalen Milroe and the guys taking down Georgia. It feels like one of those years to me, and I think Saban gets it done.
I've been thinking about it a lot. I have been thinking about it a lot, but it just comes down to the fact that you can't have an offensive line as bad as Alabama's and go toe-to-toe with Georgia for 60 minutes. Give me Kirby Smart and the Dogs.
Hey, South Carolina almost did it.
Well, they did, but they bowed out at the end.
That's very
I think
true.
Georgia's going to hang on and win an instant classic matchup in Atlanta. And the final SEC on CBS game, too.
There's a lot of farewells this week, man.
It'll never be the same. You can never go back.
We've got number 22, Tulane versus SMU. JP, who you got?
Tulane, they've been one of my favorite teams to watch all year. They've been snatching victory from the jaws of defeat all year long. You know, looking to get back to a New Year's Six bowl game. But, man, SMU has come on, as of late, creaming teams. Having like 50 points at halftime. SMU putting on before they join the ACC next year. Give me the Mustangs in a big win on the road against Tulane.
I'm going to take the Green Wave. What a cool mascot. I also just think they're
Cool
better.
color scheme.
Cool. Oh, they do have a cool color scheme, but I am still just going to take Tulane no matter what they're wearing. I think they got it. Troy App State. Who you got in this one, JP?
Carolinian brothers must always stand with the Mountaineers of
Bang.
App State, no matter how many times they beat the schools we actually go to.
That's a good
I think
point.
App State is going to go in there and get a big win over Troy, get their 9th win of the season, and another Sun Belt title to add to their collection.
He took the words out of my mouth. Give me App State. Michigan, Iowa, and God, I want Iowa to win. Probably more than anything. I don't know if I'm really allowed to say that. I don't know if it's a thing. Yeah, go Hawkeyes. I think Michigan wins. Iowa's just, they can't score points. That's kind of a thing you have to do in college football. So I'm going to take the Wolverines in this one. JP?
Iowa football is an absurdist act. It's like a performance. It's not really an actual football team. And it's going to be really funny when they pin Michigan deep and get a safety and they're up 2-0, and it's 2-0 at halftime because of Iowa's defense. But then Michigan's going to kick like a field goal and then another field goal and win 6-2, and everyone's going to be like, wow, I wish my eyes didn't work. Anyway, Florida State and Louisville in our final game of Pick'ems, the ACC showdown. You know, last time out I picked Louisville, and they proved me right with a big win against Miami on the road.
What happened last week?
Some bad stuff happened. Louisville, Big chance, big opportunity to turn the college football world on its head. Spencer, who do you got?
Give me the Noles. It was always the Noles. Frankly, we've been talking about it all year long. They've been one of those teams without Jordan Travis. Seeing what he can do literally from a hospital bed. He's got, like, I know that sounds crazy. He's got like, the whole team rallied around him.
He's a leader of men.
He's a leader of men, and I think that's so powerful. And I think if the Seminoles win,
He's like Aragorn.
it'd be a great moment. Return of the King released 20 years ago today. There you go. And for that reason, give me the Noles. JP, who you got?
You know, Peter Jackson said it was always the Noles. And I think Florida State wins. I think it's a great game. Jawar Jordan, the best tailback in the ACC. Jack Plummer's going to make some big-time throws. If Louisville can work in some play-action wrinkles, I watch them to take the lead early. Maybe pounce on Louisville, especially forcing some turnovers out of Rodemaker. But I think Florida State's going to be able to dig deep and get a big win.
I agree. JP, it's been a long one. That's going to do it for this episode of Ball Don't Lie. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, X, and Facebook at SGTV at USC.
To keep up with all of our content, be sure to also visit us online at sgtv at usc.com. For SGTV, I'm JP Barrett.
And I'm Spencer Ball. From all of us here at SGTV, have a great weekend, Carolina. Forever to thee.
One reign to rule them all.